My stepdad called me a freeloader and praised his golden son. So I canceled every bill I paid. Then my mom saw the receipts and whispered, "Wait, you were paying for all of this?" I was 26 the night everything finally boiled over. But I guess the story really started years earlier. My name is Brandon, and I grew up in a house that never truly felt like mine. My biological dad left when I was young, and when my mom remarried, I tried to be optimistic. I was only 10 years old, so in my mind, a new dad meant more family, more love, maybe even a second chance at the kind of home I had been missing. Instead, I got a man who seemed to size me up the first time we met and silently decide I was competition. His name was Doug, and I swear he had a permanent scowl carved into his face. He brought his son Tyler into the picture too. Tyler was my new stepbrother, 2 years older than me, and from the very beginning, he was the golden child. The house dynamic changed fast. Suddenly, the rules bent for Tyler. If he left his stuff all over the living room, it was just boys will be boys. But if I forgot to take out the trash once, Doug would give me this long lecture about being a man and pulling my weight. Mom would just sit there quietly, like she was trapped between defending me and keeping the peace. Back then, I did not say much. I thought if I just worked harder, got better grades, helped around the house more, then eventually they would see me as part of the family too. But no matter what I did, Tyler was the one who got praised. Tyler got average grades, and Doug said he was so smart. I got straight A's, and Doug told me not to get cocky. Tyler skipped practice, and Doug laughed, calling him independent. I missed one soccer game because I was sick, and suddenly I was letting the team down. It sounds small when I say it out loud, but when it happens every single day, it starts to pile up, like bricks on your chest. By the time I was in college, I basically lived two lives. One was on campus, where people liked me, respected me, and treated me like an adult. The other was at home, where Doug acted like everything I owned had somehow come out of his wallet. That was the most insulting part. My grandparents on my dad's side actually paid for most of my college tuition. They sent me spending money every month, and they even covered my car insurance. I worked part-time jobs too, saving every bit I could. Doug never put a cent into me after I turned 18. But he never missed a chance to remind me how much I supposedly owed him for raising me. Fast forward to last month. I had been living at home again for a while, so I could save money for a down payment on a place of my own. I paid rent, helped with groceries, and even covered the Wi-Fi bill because Doug refused to upgrade from the cheapest plan and then kept complaining about how slow it was. I did not mind contributing. Honestly, I wanted to feel like an adult who was pulling his weight. But apparently, in Doug's mind, my contributions did not count. It was one of those Sunday dinners that started off normal enough. Tyler was there bragging about some promotion he had gotten. I congratulated him. I really did. But somehow, as usual, that turned into Doug comparing us. He started with the familiar lines. How Tyler was finally stepping up. How proud he was of him. How Tyler understood responsibility. Then, out of nowhere, Doug locked eyes with me and said, "You'll never be half the man your stepbrother is." At first, I laughed. Honestly, what do you even say to that? But something inside me snapped. Years of holding my tongue boiled over, and before I knew it, I was standing. "Good," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Let him pay your bills then, because I'm done." The whole table went silent. My mom's fork clattered against her plate. She blinked at me and said, "What are you talking about? We haven't seen a cent from you." That was it. That was the spark that lit the fuse. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Years of payments, groceries, utilities, bills, and she thought I had been freeloading this whole time. I did not yell, but I think the quiet, sharp edge in my voice scared them more than shouting would have. I stood there for a moment with my hands flat on the table, breathing slowly, forcing myself to stay steady. The silence was thick, like even the air was holding its breath. Tyler was the first to break it. He leaned back in his chair with that smug little smirk he had been perfecting since middle school. "Dude, you don't even pay rent," he said casually, like he was stating some undeniable fact. I turned to him slowly. "I pay rent every single month," I said. $200 cash to Mom. Mom's face scrunched up like I had started speaking another language. "That's not rent," she said, waving her hand like I was being ridiculous. "That's just to help out with groceries." I could not help it. I laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "Groceries. Mom, I do the grocery shopping. I buy the groceries. With my card, I reached into my wallet and pulled out one receipt I had not thrown away yet. It was from just 3 days earlier. That's $176.42 for the week's food, I said. Paid by me. And you're telling me you haven't seen a cent? Doug crossed his arms and leaned back like he was watching a TV show he had seen 100 times and already knew the ending. You're overreacting, he said. Everyone chips in. That's what families do. Family also acknowledge when someone is helping, I shot back. My voice cracked a little, which made me even angrier because it was not just anger anymore. It was hurt. You've been acting like I've been freeloading here while I'm literally paying for half this house to function. Doug's face darkened. Watch your tone, he said sharply, like I was 10 years old again. I did not sit back down. Something in me refused. No, I said quietly. I've been watching my tone my whole life in this house. I'm done doing that. Tyler rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath, but I caught it. Drama queen. That was it. I turned to him, and for the first time in my life, I did not swallow it down. You think I'm dramatic. You got a brand new truck last year, paid for with family money, while I'm busting my back saving for an apartment. You don't pay a single bill here, and somehow I'm the problem. Tyler shrugged, grinning. I earned that truck, Dad said. Exactly. I cut him off. Dad said. Not Mom, not me, and not his money either. Because last I checked, Doug, you're still paying off your own car loan. That hit him. His jaw tightened. But before he could say anything, Mom jumped in. Brandon, that's enough. You're being ungrateful. Doug has done so much for you over the years. What exactly, I asked? I was genuinely curious. I was not yelling, but my voice was louder now, almost shaking. What exactly has he done for me? Because from where I'm standing, my grandparents paid for my tuition. I paid for my gas. I paid for my car insurance. I paid for my phone bill. I paid for Wi-Fi. I paid for the food we eat. So please explain to me what I'm supposed to be grateful for. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time all night, she did not have an answer. Doug stood up then, trying to reassert control. You're crossing a line, son. I'm not your son, I said flatly. The words hung in the air like thunder. Mom flinched. Tyler stopped smirking. And for a second, even Doug did not have a comeback. That night, I did not sleep much. I stayed in my room scrolling through months of bank transactions and receipts on my phone, almost obsessively. I did not want to just be angry. I wanted proof. I wanted evidence. The next morning, I taped every grocery receipt, every Wi-Fi bill, and every transfer I had made to Mom onto sheets of paper. When I was done, I had a stack that looked like I was preparing for a court case. I left it on the kitchen table before I went to work. When I came back that evening, it was gone. In its place was a short note in Mom's handwriting. We need to talk tonight. Dinner was tense. Tyler was not there, thank God. It was just me, Mom, and Doug. They waited until after we ate, which almost made it worse, like they were buttering me up for something. Mom started. We saw your evidence, she said carefully, like she was picking each word out of a minefield. And yes, you've contributed more than we realized. More than you realized, I repeated. Mom, that is literally half your bills every month. Doug held up his hand. Look, nobody's saying you haven't helped, but this attitude is not acceptable. You can't just throw it in our faces. I laughed again. It was the same bitter laugh from the night before. So let me get this straight. I quietly pay for everything. No one notices, no one thanks me, and when I finally say something, I'm the one with the attitude. Doug's face hardened. If you don't like it here, you're free to leave. There it was. The line he had been holding back for years. Mom did not stop him this time. She just sat there looking at me with this mix of sadness and maybe guilt. I could not tell anymore. I stood up. Fine, I said simply. I will. Doug smiled like he had just won something. Good. Maybe then you'll learn how hard it is to be a man. That stuck with me for the rest of the night. Not because it hurt, but because it made me realize something. Doug did not want me to be a man. Not really. He wanted me to stay the kid he could lecture, control, and guilt trip. The second I stood up for myself, I stopped being useful to him. But I was not done. Not yet. Over the next few days, I started making quiet changes. I canceled the Wi-Fi account that was under my name. I transferred the utilities I had been paying back into their names. I stopped buying groceries. I stopped filling the pantry like I always did. I was not rude about it. I just stopped doing it. And that was when the cracks started to show. By the end of the week, the fridge was nearly empty. Doug tried to blame me for forgetting to shop, but I just shrugged and said, "Oh, I figured you'd handle it since you're the man of the house." The look on his face was priceless. Then the Wi-Fi cut off. Tyler apparently called Mom from work in a panic because he could not finish some project without it. Doug stormed into my room that night, demanding to know what had happened. I did not even look up from my laptop. "You said I was free to leave," I said, "so I left. Just not physically. Yet." He stood there, red-faced, for a solid 10 seconds before slamming my door so hard the frame rattled. But I knew this was just the beginning. If I was going to really make a point and protect myself in the process, I had to be smart about what came next. And what happened a few days later set the stage for everything that followed. It was bigger than anything I could have planned. The next few days felt like living in a different house entirely. The silence was heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. Mom barely spoke to me, except to ask if I was coming to dinner. Doug kept his distance, but I could feel his glare on me every time we crossed paths. Tyler, on the other hand, was loving it. He started leaving little notes on the fridge. "Shopping list. Thanks, little bro." Or "Wi-Fi, please," with a smiley face. He was trying to get under my skin, but I did not take the bait. By Friday, though, I could tell things were coming to a head. I walked into the kitchen that evening and saw Mom sitting at the table with a stack of envelopes. She looked exhausted, like she had aged a year in a week. "We got the utility bills," she said, without looking up. "Yeah." I leaned against the counter. "They've doubled since last month." I raised an eyebrow. "Not my problem anymore." "You and Doug said I was freeloading, so I decided to stop freeloading." That made her look up. "Don't be smart with me, Brandon. This is serious. We can't afford this right now." I crossed my arms. "Then maybe Doug can ask Tyler to be a man for once." Her face fell. For a second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered every time I had been told to stay quiet, every time Doug had lectured me while Tyler got away with everything. And that sympathy dried up fast. Saturday morning was the real turning point. I had the weekend off work, so I slept in a little. When I came downstairs, my bedroom door was standing wide open, which was strange because I always kept it closed. My stomach sank. My dresser drawers were open. My laundry basket was tipped over. My desk was a mess. My laptop was still there, but its charger was missing. So were two of my video games, a pair of sneakers, and then my heart actually skipped. The envelope where I kept my down payment savings was gone. Months of careful saving, gone. I tore through the room just to be sure, but it was not there. I practically flew down the stairs. Mom was in the living room folding laundry. "Where's my envelope?" I asked, louder than I meant to. She looked up startled. "What envelope?" "You know what envelope. The one in my desk drawer. It had over $3,000 in it." Her mouth opened, then closed. She did not answer. Doug came in from the garage right then, holding a wrench like he had been working on something. "What's with the yelling?" I turned on him. "Did you go in my room?" He did not even flinch. "Yes." That stopped me cold. "You what?" "You don't pay enough to have privacy in this house," he said flatly. "We needed to see if you had anything stashed away. And looks like you did." My blood went cold. "What did you do with my money?" He smirked. He actually smirked. "Consider it rent." I swear the room spun for a second. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the back of the couch to steady myself. "You stole my money." "Don't use that word, Mom," said quickly, standing now. "It's not stealing, Brandon. We just borrowed it. We're behind on some bills and Tyler's car payment is due and—" "Tyler's car payment." My voice cracked on the words. "You took my savings to pay for Tyler's truck." Mom flinched, but she did not deny it. I laughed. It was hollow and humorless, and it did not even sound like me. "Unbelievable. You actually proved my point better than I ever could." Doug stepped closer, towering over me. "Watch yourself. You're still under my roof." "Not for long," I said quietly. My whole body was shaking now. Not from fear, from rage. I stormed back upstairs and slammed my door, my mind racing. I could not believe it. Not just that they had taken the money, but that they did not even seem sorry. They acted like it was their right, like everything I had belonged to them by default. For the rest of the day, I stayed in my room. Every time I heard Tyler's voice downstairs, laughing like nothing was wrong, it made my blood boil. Around dinner time, I heard him say, loud enough for me to catch it through the door, "Guess I don't have to worry about my truck getting repossessed now. Thanks, bro." I think that was the moment something in me clicked. This was not just unfair. It was betrayal. Deep personal betrayal from the people who were supposed to have my back. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I did not want to tip them off completely. Not yet. I needed time to figure out my next move. When I left for work the next morning, I did not come back. I stayed at a friend's place across town. Someone I trusted and told him everything. His name was Eric, and he was furious on my behalf. But he also gave me advice that stuck with me. Don't just blow up on them, he said. Make them feel it where it hurts, but make it clean. No one can call you the bad guy if you do it smart. So that was what I decided to do. The next time I walked back into that house, I was not just angry Brandon anymore. I was calm, focused. Every word I spoke was measured, and the look on Doug's face when he saw me like that, not yelling, not crying, just stone cold told me he realized something. I was not playing their game anymore. But then came the final straw, the act that took this from betrayal to all-out war. It was Tuesday night. I had just gotten back from the bank where I opened a new account and changed all my direct deposits. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Tyler's truck was parked crooked, almost blocking the garage. Inside the house, voices were raised. I paused in the hallway, listening. Told you he'd overreact, Tyler was saying. He'll get over it, Doug replied. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. And if he does leave, we can use his room for storage. Then Mom's voice came in, quieter, almost hesitant. What about his job? His boss called earlier. He left a message saying Brandon didn't show up today. He's never missed a shift before. Oh, that, Doug said casually. I called his boss, told him Brandon was going through some stuff and might not be a good fit right now. Better to cut him loose before he causes problems. I froze. My hands went numb. He called my boss. He actually sabotaged my job. I stepped into the living room then, and the look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Doug's smug satisfaction. Tyler's faint amusement. Mom's guilty wince. You called my boss. My voice was so quiet, it scared even me. Doug shrugged. You were getting out of control. You need some humility, Brandon. This is for your own good. That was the moment the last bit of whatever tie I had left to this family snapped. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I just nodded slowly, like I had finally solved a puzzle that had been haunting me my entire life. Okay, I said simply. Okay. And I walked upstairs, closed my door, and started planning. Really planning. Because this was not just about money anymore. It was about respect. About dignity. About finally standing up after years of being told to sit down. And when I was done, they would not just lose me. They would lose the illusion that they had any control over me at all. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my chest so tight it felt like someone was sitting on me. I kept replaying Doug's voice in my head, calm, dismissive, like he had every right to call my boss and tank my job, like I was still 10 years old and had to be taught a lesson. By the time the sun started to rise, I had made my decision. I could not stay in that house any longer, not for another night, not even for another hour. I got up quietly and packed the rest of my clothes, my laptop, and anything I could not stand to lose. Every zipper sounded like thunder in the early morning quiet. I half expected Doug to barge in and demand to know what I was doing, but the house stayed silent. When I was done, I took one last look at my room, at the walls I had painted, at the shelves I had put up myself, at the space that had been my only refuge for years. Then I shut the door softly behind me. I did not leave a note. They did not deserve one. The drive to Eric's apartment felt unreal. Like I was watching someone else's life through a car window. When I got there, Eric just nodded like he had been expecting me. He did not ask questions. He helped me bring my bags in and handed me a spare key. You can stay as long as you need, he said simply. I thanked him, but the words felt hollow, because as relieved as I was to be out of that house, I could not shake the weight in my chest. I had lost my savings, my job, and whatever scraps of trust I still had in my family. All in the span of a week. The first few days were the worst. I would wake up in the morning, stare at my phone, and have to resist the urge to text my mom. Not to forgive her, just to see if she would reach out, to see if she would apologize. She did not. The only messages I got were from Tyler, and they were as obnoxious as ever. Hope you're having fun playing house with your friend. Then another one. Trump payment cleared today. Winky face. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I focused on survival. I spent hours updating my resume, calling old coworkers, and checking job boards. Losing that job stung not just financially, but because I had actually liked it. My boss had always been fair with me. I almost called him to explain what had happened, but I stopped myself. If Doug was willing to interfere once, who knew what he might say next to discredit me? In the evenings, Eric and I would sit on his balcony with takeout containers between us. He mostly let me sit in silence, but every so often, he would say something that snapped me out of my spiral. You know, he said one night, "This might be the best thing that ever happened to you." I gave him a look. "I just lost everything I've been working for." "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "But now you know exactly where you stand. No more illusions. No more wasting energy trying to win over people who never planned on giving you credit in the first place." I hated that he was right. The longer I stayed away, the more I started to see how warped my life in that house had been. I did not have to brace myself for a lecture every time I walked into the kitchen. I did not have to hear Doug's snide comments about being a man or Tyler's lazy insults. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But the anger did not go away. If anything, it grew sharper. Every time I opened my banking app and saw my drained savings account, I felt it flare again. Every time I remembered Doug's smug face as he told me I would learn how hard it was to be a man, I felt it all over again. Then, about a week after I left, Mom called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I answered. "Brandon," she said, her voice cautious. "Yeah, can we talk?" I did not say anything, so she kept going. "It's been quiet around here. Tyler misses you." I almost laughed. "Tyler misses having someone to blame for everything." She sighed. "Look, we didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. Doug was just trying to teach you responsibility." "He stole my money, Mom." There was a pause. "We were going to pay it back." "When?" "After Tyler's next vacation." "After the next truck upgrade." Silence again. "I can't keep doing this," I said finally. "I'm not coming back." Her voice trembled a little. "Brandon, please. We're still family." "Family doesn't do what you did," I said quietly. "At least, not the kind of family I want to have." I hung up before she could reply. That night, something shifted in me. The sadness was still there, but it was not the heavy, suffocating sadness from before. It was sharper now, almost electric. For the first time, I was not just thinking about surviving this. I was thinking about what came next. I started writing everything down. Dates, amounts, what they had taken, what they had said. I gathered screenshots of every transfer, every bill I had, covered every receipt. It felt obsessive, but it also felt good, like I was building something. I also started looking into legal options. I was not sure if I had a case. After all, the money I gave for groceries had technically been voluntary while I was living there. But I wanted to know my rights. I reached out to a local legal aid office and set up a consultation. While I waited for the appointment, I doubled down on job hunting. I landed 2 interviews by the end of the week. Nothing fancy, but enough to get me back on my feet. I also opened a separate savings account, one they could not touch even if they tried. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to feel like myself again. But then, just when I was beginning to breathe a little easier, Mom showed up at Eric's apartment. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had just gotten back from one of the interviews. Eric opened the door and gave me a look that said, "You'd better deal with this." Mom was standing there with a plastic container of food, my favorite lasagna. She looked tired, but not angry. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, but I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, and she started slowly. "Doug thinks you're being dramatic," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Of course he does. But I think—" She hesitated. "I think we made a mistake." I did not say anything. "I miss you," she admitted. "I know you were helping more than we gave you credit for. But Doug says you still owe the house rent for the months you stayed there." I blinked. "You took my savings, and now you think I owe you more." She flinched, but she did not deny it. "You were still living there, Brandon." It was almost funny at that point. Almost. I stood up and grabbed the folder I had been putting together, the one with every receipt and every bank statement. I dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. "That's what I paid," I said flatly. "Add it up. If you still think I owe you after that, then we can take it to court." Her eyes widened. For the first time, I saw fear flash across her face. She did not say anything else. She just left the lasagna on the table and walked out. As the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something. I was not at rock bottom anymore. I was climbing out of it, and I was doing it on my own terms. But I also knew this was not over, not even close, because something told me Doug was not going to let this go quietly, and I was ready for whatever came next. The week after Mom's visit was a turning point. For the first time in months, I woke up feeling clear-headed. It was not like all the pain had disappeared, far from it. But I finally felt like I had something to work toward instead of just something to run from. I started by throwing myself into rebuilding my life from the ground up. My second interview went well, better than I expected actually. It was for a logistics coordinator role at a mid-sized company across town. The hiring manager was direct but fair, and she seemed genuinely impressed when I explained how I had managed household budgeting for years, balancing bills and expenses for 3 adults, while holding a part-time job and going to school. Sounds like you've got real-world management experience, she said with a smile. You'd be surprised how many applicants don't know how to keep things organized. I walked out of that interview feeling lighter. By the end of the week, I got the call. They wanted to offer me the position. It paid better than my old job, had benefits, and even had a chance for advancement. When I told Eric, he actually clapped me on the back. That's it, man. That's your way out. Start stacking cash and get your own place. And that was exactly what I did. I cut every expense I could. I ate cheap, stayed in, and picked up a few extra shifts whenever they were offered. The first paycheck I got from that new job felt like a declaration of independence. I opened that new savings account and transferred almost all of it in, leaving just enough for groceries and gas. Slowly but surely, things started falling into place. By the end of the second month, I had saved back almost half of what Doug had stolen from me. My confidence was coming back too. I started going to the gym with Eric a few times a week, just to get out of my head and channel some of the frustration somewhere productive. It was rough at first. I had never been much of a gym guy. But after a few weeks, I started to notice small changes. My posture was straighter, my clothes fit better. I felt stronger, literally and figuratively. The change did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, I ran into an old classmate at the grocery store. She did a double take and said, "Wow, Brandon, you look good." Like, good. It threw me off for a second. But as I walked back to my car, I could not stop smiling. It was not just my appearance that was improving. My mindset was changing too. The bitterness was still there, but it was not consuming me anymore. Instead, it was fueling me, pushing me to build something better. I also kept meticulous track of every single document I gathered about my time living at Mom and Doug's house. It had started as a way to keep myself busy, but now it felt like I was building a weapon. Not a physical one, a paper weapon. One that could cut through every lie they had ever told about me freeloading or not contributing. Then, one Friday night, I got a text from Mom. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. She called a few minutes later. "Doug wants to have a family meeting," she said carefully. "He thinks it's time we clear the air." I almost laughed. Clear the air. Is that what he calls it? "Brandon, please," she said softly. "I miss you." There was something in her voice that sounded almost desperate. I agreed to meet them, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because part of me wanted to see how far they would go. When I walked into the house that Sunday, it felt strange. The air smelled like the roast Mom always made on special occasions. But there was tension underneath it, like everyone was bracing for a storm. Doug was sitting at the head of the table, arms crossed. Tyler was there too, scrolling through his phone like he could not be bothered to look up. Doug started talking the second I sat down. "You've made your point," he said gruffly. "We know you were contributing more than we thought. But this staying away, refusing to help, it's gone on long enough." I did not say anything. I just let him keep going. "You're still part of this family," he said. "And part of being a family is pulling your weight." I pulled out my folder and slid it across the table. "That's me pulling my weight," I said flatly. "Every grocery receipt, every Wi-Fi bill, every transfer. If you still think I didn't do enough after looking at that, then I don't know what to tell you." Doug glanced at it, but did not open it. "You can't put a price on living under my roof," he said. "That's funny," I replied. "Because you literally put a price on it when you took my savings." His jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. Tyler finally spoke up. "So what? You're just gonna hold this grudge forever? You're acting like some martyr, when all you had to do was follow the house rules." I turned to him. "House rules? Like what?" Keep quiet while you get everything handed to you. Maybe if you weren't so bitter all the time. Enough, I cut him off. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to say this. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. I'm saving for my own place. I have a better job. I don't need this anymore. Doug laughed then. It was a short, dismissive sound. You think you can do better on your own. You wouldn't last a month without us. I smiled. Not the bitter smile from before. A real one this time. Funny because it's been 2 months already, and I've never been doing better. The look on his face was priceless, like he had just realized I was not bluffing. I left right after that, and this time I did not feel heavy walking out the door. I felt powerful. The next few weeks flew by. My job started giving me more responsibility. I even got a small bonus for catching a scheduling error that could have cost the company thousands. My boss pulled me aside and said, "Good eye, Brandon. Keep this up, and we might have a team lead position for you soon." When I told Eric, he grinned. You realize what this means, right? You're not just surviving anymore. You're winning. And he was right. I started apartment hunting seriously. By then, I had enough saved for a deposit and the first month's rent. I found a small but clean one-bedroom apartment not too far from work. And when I signed the lease, I felt like I was signing the first page of a new chapter in my life. Moving day was surreal. I did not tell Mom or Doug. I just packed up the last of my things from Eric's place and set up my new apartment. That night, I sat down on the floor eating cheap takeout with boxes still all around me and felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. But I was not done. Because as good as it felt to build this new life, there was still unfinished business with Doug and Tyler. They had not learned anything, not really. And deep down, I knew that until they faced the consequences of what they had done, they would just keep doing it to someone else. So as I unpacked my things and set up my little apartment, I started planning, not out of anger anymore, out of something colder, sharper. It was time to make sure they finally understood that I was not their scapegoat anymore. And when the opportunity finally came, when the perfect storm lined up, I was ready. A few weeks after I moved into my apartment, I started to notice something interesting. The calls from Mom became more frequent. At first, it was just the occasional text, "How are you?" Or, "Did you eat?" But then she started actually calling sometimes late at night when I could tell she had been crying. "Things have been tense around here," she said during one of those calls. "Doug is angry all the time. Tyler's been snapping at him too. The bills are piling up." I did not gloat, even though part of me wanted to. Instead, I just listened. And the more I listened, the clearer it became that without my contributions, the household had started to strain. Grocery costs were higher than Doug expected. Tyler had missed a car payment because he spent too much on a weekend trip with his friends, which caused an argument so loud the neighbors complained. I kept my voice calm, almost casual. "Maybe it's time Tyler starts helping out more," I said. Mom sighed. "You know how Doug is. He thinks Tyler needs to focus on his job and not worry about the house." I almost laughed. Funny. I had a job when I lived there, and that never stopped him from expecting me to pay for everything. She did not respond to that. Around that time, I got promoted to team lead at work. It came with a raise, better hours, and most importantly, more control over my schedule. It was a huge confidence boost, and it also freed up more time for me to focus on getting my financial life in order. I met with a lawyer at the legal aid office and brought my carefully compiled folder of receipts and bank statements. He flipped through it, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "You've got a solid paper trail," he said. "It's tricky because technically you were giving some of this money voluntarily, but if you can prove they took the savings without your consent, you might have a small claims case." That lit a fire in me. I was not sure if I would actually go through with filing a claim, but just knowing I had the option gave me leverage. Meanwhile, I started hearing more through the grapevine about Doug and Tyler. Word travels fast in a small town, and apparently, Doug had been bragging at the hardware store that he had put me in my place, and that I would come crawling back any day now. That made me smile, because nothing could have been further from the truth. Then something happened that gave me the perfect opportunity. I was at work one afternoon when my boss mentioned an upcoming contract that would require outside help for a big shipment. "We're looking for a reliable subcontractor," she said. "Someone local, small business, affordable. Know anyone?" That was when it clicked. Doug's side business, the one he had been running for years, doing delivery and hauling jobs, was exactly the kind of business my company would hire for something like this. And suddenly, I realized I had something powerful. Influence. I did not say anything right away. I just asked for the details and made a mental note to keep an eye on when the final decision would be made. That night, I called Mom back. Tyler answered instead, his tone mocking from the first word. "Look who it is. You ready to apologize and come home yet?" I smiled to myself. "No, Tyler. I'm calling to tell Mom something important." "She's busy." "Then tell her this. I have a new job. I just got promoted, and I'm doing better than ever." There was a pause on the line. "Good for you," he said sarcastically. "Want a medal?" "No," I said evenly. "But you might want to tell Doug. I have some connections now that he might find useful." I hung up before he could reply. A few days later, Mom called me back. This time, she sounded different, almost nervous. "Doug heard what you said to Tyler," she said. "He wants to know what you meant." I kept my tone light, just that I'm in a position to help him. Or not. Silence stretched over the line. "Brandon," she said finally, "if you can help us, we could really use it right now. Things are tight." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her words sink in. This was it. The first time she had admitted they needed me. "I'll think about it," I said. "But I have conditions." She did not argue. She just said, "Okay." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list, not just of what I wanted from them, but of what they owed me financially and emotionally. I was not going to let them back into my life on their terms. This time, it would be on mine. Over the next week, I quietly gathered even more leverage. I asked my boss if I could sit in on the subcontractor vetting process just to observe. She agreed, and I got a front row seat to the decision-making. Doug's business was on the list of candidates. When his proposal came in, I almost laughed out loud. It was overpriced, sloppy, and full of hidden fees. It was exactly the kind of thing that would get rejected outright. But I did not reject it. Not yet. I kept that information to myself. Instead, I waited. Sure enough, a few days later, Mom called again. This time, Doug was on speakerphone. "We heard you might be able to get us a contract with your company," he said. His tone was gruff, but not as smug as usual. "Maybe," I said. "But like I told Mom, I have conditions." "What conditions?" "I want my savings back, every cent. And I want an acknowledgement from both of you that I contributed more than you gave me credit for. No more calling me a freeloader. No more lectures about being a man. You do that, and I'll see what I can do." There was a long silence. "That's blackmail," Doug said finally. "No," I said calmly. "That's negotiation." And for the first time in years, I heard something in Doug's voice I had never heard before. Hesitation. When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. I was not just reacting to them anymore. I was setting the terms. I had power now, and I was not afraid to use it. The next step was going to be crucial. I needed to make sure that when the tables finally turned, there would be no going back to the way things were. And as the final contract decision approached, I started putting every piece into place. Because when it all came together, Doug and Tyler were going to learn exactly how it felt to underestimate me. The morning of the subcontractor decision meeting, I woke up earlier than usual. I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and went over my notes one last time. Every number, every receipt, every email from my boss about the process. I reviewed it all until I could have recited it in my sleep. This was not just about getting even anymore. It was about making sure the narrative finally changed. For years, Doug had painted me as the ungrateful kid, the freeloader, the one who needed to learn responsibility. Today was the day that flipped for good. When I walked into the office that morning, my boss waved me into the conference room where the team was meeting. A stack of subcontractor bids sat in the center of the table. Doug's company's proposal was right on top of his company name, written in bold letters. I kept my expression neutral as we went through the list one by one. The other bids were reviewed first. Most of them were cheaper, more professional, and more thorough than Doug's. When it came time for his, I stayed quiet at first. "This one is way overpriced," one of my coworkers said, flipping through the pages. "And they've got a bunch of hidden fuel surcharges buried in the fine print." "Yeah, this is sloppy," another added. "Not a great fit." That was my moment. "Can I offer some context?" I said calmly. They all looked at me. "I know the owner personally," I continued, "and I can tell you they have a reputation for cutting corners. I've seen it firsthand. Missed deadlines, last-minute price hikes, jobs that weren't finished properly." I was not lying. I had seen Doug pull all of those stunts before, but I said it in such a calm, professional tone that it did not sound personal. "Good to know," my boss said, scribbling something in the margin. That's exactly the kind of headache we don't want for this job. And just like that, Doug's proposal went into the discard pile. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I just sat there quiet and professional as we picked a different subcontractor. A smaller, hungrier business run by a guy I knew would knock it out of the park. When the meeting was over, I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun and let myself breathe. My hands were steady. My heart was not racing. This was not the shaky, explosive anger from months ago. This was something colder, calmer. It felt good. That evening, I waited until after dinner time to make my move. I called Mom's phone. Doug answered. Well, he said, no greeting, just that one word. They went with another subcontractor, I said simply. There was silence on the other end. Then you did this, he said, his voice low and sharp. I didn't make your proposal overpriced, I replied. I didn't put hidden fees in your contract. I just told the truth when they asked me about you. You ruined us. No, I said, my voice, calm. I just stopped letting you ruin me. I could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. You'll regret this, he said finally. I already did, I said, for years. But not anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else. Over the next few days, the fallout started to trickle in. Mom texted me first, saying Doug was furious and Tyler was calling me every name in the book. I did not reply. Then something unexpected happened. The owner of the smaller subcontractor my company hired called me personally to thank me. This contract is a game changer for us, he said. You just kept my guys working for the next 3 months. I hung up smiling. Not only had I stopped Doug from profiting off me again, but I had helped someone else succeed in the process. But I was not done. The next step was getting my savings back. I filed a claim in small claims court, attaching every receipt and statement I had. I knew it might not get me everything, but even the act of filing was a statement. I was not going to be intimidated into silence anymore. When the court papers were served, Mom called me crying. Brandon, how could you do this to us? You did it to yourselves, I said gently. This is just me holding you accountable. I just wanted us to be a family again, she whispered. Then you should have acted like one when I was still under your roof, I said. And I ended the call. By then, word had started to spread around town. People knew something had gone down between me and Doug, and not everyone was taking his side. Apparently, one of his bigger clients heard about what happened and decided to review their own contract with him. The next time I saw Doug, it was at the grocery store of all places. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically. The arrogance was just gone. He did not yell. He did not sneer. He just looked at me, then looked away. Tyler was not so quiet. He tried to confront me in the parking lot, ranting about how I had destroyed their business and embarrassed the family. You know what's really embarrassing? I said, keeping my voice calm. Having to explain to a judge why you thought stealing my savings was okay. He did not have a comeback for that. Walking away from that conversation, I felt taller, lighter. Like I had finally stepped out of a shadow I had not even realized I had been living under. But the best part was that I was not angry anymore, because the revenge was not about punishing them. Not really. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my life. And I had done that. Still, I knew there was one final chapter left. The moment where everything would come to a head. The moment where Doug and Mom would finally have to face me, not as the kid they could control, but as an adult who did not owe them anything. And when that moment came, I was ready to look them in the eye and say the one thing I had been holding in for years. 2 weeks later, the court date finally came. I showed up early, dressed in my best button-down shirt and clean shoes. My hands were steady as I checked in with the clerk and sat down on the bench outside the courtroom. Doug and Mom walked in together a few minutes later. Doug's face was red. His jaw was tight. But he did not look at me right away. Mom looked tired. Almost drained, like the past few months had worn her down completely. Tyler was not there. Apparently, he had work, but I suspected he just did not want to face me. When our case was called, we stood before the judge. I presented my folder of evidence, every receipt and bank transfer neatly organized. I spoke clearly and calmly, explaining how I had contributed to the household, how I had saved for months, and how Doug had taken the money without my consent. Doug tried to interrupt several times, but the judge cut him off. You'll have your turn, she said sternly. When Doug finally did speak, it was the same speech I had heard my whole life. He was living under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity. That money was rent he owed. He's just trying to punish us for giving him tough love. The judge flipped through my folder and raised an eyebrow. These receipts show consistent contributions toward groceries and utilities. That would generally be considered rent or at least shared expenses. And you admit you took the savings. Doug hesitated. Then he muttered, "Yes, but." "No buts," the judge said sharply. "You don't get to help yourself to someone else's money without their consent. I'm ordering you to return the full amount." Doug's face went crimson. Mom's eyes welled with tears. I did not gloat. I did not smile. I just nodded. When we walked out of the courtroom, Doug rounded on me. "You happy now? You humiliated us." I turned to face him squarely. "No, Doug. You humiliated yourself the day you went into my room and stole from me." This, I said, gesturing back toward the courtroom doors, was me refusing to let you keep doing it. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Mom stepped closer, then her voice quiet. "Brandon, I'm sorry." I look at her for a long moment. For the first time, it actually sounded like she meant it. "I believe you," I said softly. "But sorry doesn't erase what happened. You chose to let him treat me like I didn't matter, and I can't come back from that." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. The court-ordered repayment came through 2 weeks later. Seeing that money land back in my account was surreal. Not because of the amount, but because it felt like a line in the sand. That chapter was over. By then, my apartment was fully set up. I had furniture I had picked out myself, a little coffee table where I kept fresh flowers, and a sense of peace I had not had in years. My promotion was going well, and my boss had already hinted about giving me more responsibility. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to stop by Mom's house one last time. Not to reconcile, to close the loop. When I pulled up, the yard was overgrown, and the house looked more worn than I remembered. Tyler's truck was parked in the driveway, mud splattered up the sides. I knocked on the door and waited. Doug opened it. He did not say anything. He just stared at me. "I came to tell you something," I said evenly. "I don't hate you. I don't even wish you harm. But I'm done being your scapegoat. I've got my own place, my own job, my own life, and you're not part of it anymore." He scowled, but there was no fight left in him. Mom appeared behind him, her eyes hopeful. "Brandon, I wish you well, Mom," I said gently. "But I'm not coming back." Then I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, Tyler stepped outside. "So that's it. You just walk away." I looked at him over the roof of my car. "Yeah, that's it. You wanted the golden child spot. Congratulations, it's all yours. Bills, tension, lectures, all of it. You can be the man of the house now." For once, he did not have a smart remark. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. That night, I sat in my apartment with the windows open, the cool air drifting in. My phone buzzed with a notification. My savings account had just crossed the threshold I had been aiming for. I poured myself a drink, leaned back on my couch, and smiled to myself. I had not just survived what they threw at me. I had built something better. And the best part was that I did not owe them a single thing anymore. I raised my glass to the quiet room and said it out loud just for myself. Doug was right about one thing. I did become a man. Just not the way he wanted. Then I took a long sip, feeling lighter than I ever had, and let the silence of my new life settle around me like a victory banner. Because for the first time in years, I was not waiting for someone else's approval. I had already won.